Laptop's not working. I think it's the laptop, if anything.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee. It's November the 21st, it's 1 o'clock, and we're at City Hall. Welcome to our temporary digs. Our chambers upstairs are going under renovations and using some new technology, so we're down here for probably the month of November and maybe part of December. So again, welcome. I call this meeting to order. We would like to acknowledge our newest member, two newest members. Councillor Hensley, welcome to the Environment and Sustainability Committee. Have you been on this committee before, David?
Long time.
Is that right? And please introduce us to your executive director. That's okay.
Well, should be here. Fully registered microchip.
Oh, excellent. And rumor has it he's also a Habs fan too. So that's
No, he's got the Boston collar on. He's all Boston.
So welcome to Councillor Hensley. We'll let folks know that this meeting is being broadcast on Facebook Live, and for those of you with the mic, please make sure you wait into the mic to speak because it's being picked up on Facebook Live. So approval of minutes of October 4th, 2018.
I move.
Moved by Councillor Zarowski, seconded by Councillor Stretch. All in favor?
Aye.
We have minutes. Thank you. We now come to number 3, approval of order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Mr. Crook?
Yes, there's been one item that requires a standing committee's approval, being item 12.1.5, single-use item reduction strategy. As this was a late report under Section 24 of Administrative Order 1 respecting the procedures of Council, in order for the standing committee to discuss the staff item, a majority vote will be required.
So we vote now to is there a motion asking before, or we just simply vote on it?
I think we can just vote on the end, as it's just a majority, probably.
So we're looking to add that item to the agenda. Would you speak or Councillor?
Since
Push the button, Councillor.
yes, buttons.
You're a scientist, I know.
I'm a theoretical scientist. Practicality has nothing to do with it. Since I haven't had a chance to really dive into this the way I want to, I would like to defer this until the next meeting, which is coming up very shortly, I understand, December 6th. So would it be possible not to include this and push this off till the 6th?
And help me out here, David. My desire, Councillor, if my colleagues are okay with it, I would like to add it to the agenda, have some discussion around it. And I agree with you that we haven't had a chance to really dive into this report. But I would like to have some discussion. A lot of people come up today and may want to speak to it also. Maybe defer the decision if we can do that. So first of all, can we have an agreement to get it on the agenda so we can further that conversation? I think that's the right procedure.
Yes, a civil majority vote will allow the committee to, or so the standing committee to actually discuss that, and then subject to solicitor hearing instead of your prerogative whether you'd like to defer that after discussion.
So we could have agreement, we discuss when it comes up on the agenda, good council. So we have agreement to add it to the agenda, then we can determine later to what extent to agree. All in favor?
Aye.
And one opposed. So there we go. That's 2/3, I believe.
A sigh comes in as an opposition.
I
Okay.
understand your size after 2 years very well, Councillor. Thank you. Are there any other orders of business or any other business or business? No. So that report now that it's added to the agenda is made available to the folks that are here, and will it be online too? Yep. So it'll be available. Thank you. Moving on, number 4, this is arising out of the minutes. Seeing none. And then we have a call for declaration of conflict of interest. Seeing none. Motions of reconsideration, motions of rescissions, considerations of deferred business, and notice of table matters, all none. And 10 is correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Mr. Clerk, do you have any correspondence or petitions?
The clerk's office has received correspondence relating to item 12.1.5, as well as correspondence submitted by Dennis Rader, all of which has been circulated to members of the standing committee.
Thank you. Colleagues, any petitions or to add? None, thank you. So now we come time for information on items brought forward. There are none, and now it's time for reports. And we have a couple of key reports. First up is 12.1.1, Community Energy and Climate Action Plan, HRM Climate Strategy. And please take the Shannon, there was a comment over here that the mic was a little high. That came from over here, though, Shannon, not from me. I respect our staff. Thank you, Shannon, and welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee. My name is Shannon Miedema, and I'm the Manager of Energy and Environment within the Planning Department of HRM. And I have with me my colleague Alex McDonald, who is our Climate Change Specialist. And we're just going to give you a briefing really of our current efforts to update all of our climate plans into an overarching and comprehensive community energy and climate action plan. So just to set the stage at the international level, we have the Paris Agreement that was reached in 2015 that aims to keep global temperature rise in this century below 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And encourages us to limit this even further to within 1.5 degrees Celsius. And then we have the recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change special report that highlights the risks of 2 degrees versus 1.5 degrees before 2100. At the same time, we have the United Nations Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction spanning from 2015 to 2030, which focuses on reducing the loss of life, damage to infrastructure and the environment, largely from extreme weather impacts, and it encourages us as communities and nations to build back better. So these two bodies of emergency management and climate science have come together recently to tackle climate change, and our approach to updating our climate plans and working together is going to parallel this. Just a brief overview, I think most of you are well aware of our current and future climate risks within the municipality, but they largely consist of sea level rise, coastal and overland flooding, extreme weather events and impacts such as storm surge, windstorms, wildfire, disease and invasive species, and then the impacts of these risks on our ecosystem services. So Halifax is a growing metropolis. We're nearing 500,000 people, and as we grow, climate impacts are going to be of increasing concern. Our corporate emissions, so as an organization, what we calculate as our greenhouse gas emissions, are around 80,000 tons of equivalent carbon dioxide right now. But as a community at large, we're at 7.6 million tons. So this means that as an organization, we directly control a small 1% of our total community emissions. That means that for an effective new climate target to 2050, we need to work collaboratively with all key stakeholders and influencers to come up with a common vision for HRM by 2050 to have the highest impact. So we're considering questions like, what would 80% reduction in greenhouse gases as a community look like in 2050? Or net zero by 2040, or 2030, or 2060? These types of questions require some modeling and some stakeholder engagement, and we anticipate that all scenarios will require transformational change at all levels. Canadian cities have an important role to play in our nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. So while corporately we control 1% of the community, our community as a whole contributes about 1% to the national total of emissions. So it's small, but it's big. Halifax is the largest city in Atlantic Canada, and what we do has influence over others. And if we make smart decisions now, we can anticipate positive impacts to our socioeconomic and environmental states going forward. This is a breakdown of the community emissions from our 2014 inventory. And I'm not sure if you can, I think you can read it on the screen, but the largest contributors are residential buildings, commercial and institutional buildings and facilities, on-road transportation or the transportation network itself, and manufacturing, industries, and construction. So I'm going to pass it over to Alex now, who's going to drill down into some of the details of the plan and our current efforts.
Great, thank you, Shannon, and thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for this opportunity. I'll pick up where Shannon left off to discuss the objectives of our Ccap, the Community Energy and Climate Action Plan moving forward. So this is this plan. We strive to use an integrated, inclusive process to develop this plan to help transition Halifax sustainably and equitably toward a low-carbon economy and a low-carbon society by 2050. That will include things like looking at ways to improve our energy conservation and energy efficiency, and part and parcel with that is reducing the emissions that result from our use of energy. We'll be looking at sector-specific strategies, SMART targets, so if you think of the acronym SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-sensitive or time-bound. We want to look at those strategies with stakeholders from each sector, each of the sectors on the pie chart Shannon just displayed, and consider the influence and impact that HRM, as the body responsible for regional planning and priority planning for things like integrated mobility plan and setting out densification targets, things like that over time, how those strategies can be inclusive and integrated, and also look at the increased availability of renewable energy and low carbon intensity fuels, or fuels with lower carbon intensity over time. I mentioned earlier the low carbon society. Well, part of that is helping our residents and communities prepare for the impacts of climate change and ensure they have capacity to adapt and remain resilient in the face of that adaptation. And not just our residents, but also our built infrastructure and of course the environment around us. And we also want to ensure that what we're doing is inclusive and involves solutions that leave no one behind. We're going to base this process on the best available science and data that we have. Shannon mentioned we're going to be doing undertaking a modeling process to look at climate scenarios, basically what does climate change look like in Halifax out to 2050, and look at the mitigation pathways, basically ways we can reduce our emissions out to 2050. We want to look at low, medium, and high emissions scenarios, with input from our stakeholders, because not all stakeholders are where we are today. We want to make sure that everyone moves along together and that we understand, we meet people where they are at the outset of this process. We'll look at incremental targets, 5-year increments, and we're borrowing a component of the Paris Agreement, this idea of 5-year stock takes. That's a really important means to ensure that as we set our target for 2050, we're reconvening stakeholders to basically do a check-in to see how we're proceeding, how we're progressing forward. We also want to look at the interaction with what we do on the mitigation side with adaptation. How does that impact our communities? How do we impact, how vulnerable are people to climate change risks to begin with? But then if we do things, if we suggest mitigation strategies like electric vehicles, for instance, is that actually compounding a vulnerability for people who face energy poverty? People who have difficulty or who are facing difficulty paying electrical bills. Switching to an electric vehicle is not necessarily, it can come with benefits, but also some harms. So we want to look at those socioeconomic considerations, and again, leave no one behind. We're looking at a collaborative process. We've set up 2 pre-consultation groups. One is a group of external stakeholders, and we've invited more than 100 organizations within the HRM community to the table to help us determine what low, medium, and high emissions futures look like for HRM. We've set out 5 levels of participation, recognizing that not everyone has the same time to invest in this process, but everyone's voice is important. And we're having our kickoff meeting next week. On the internal side, we also want to engage representatives from all business units within the organization, again, to ensure that we're all speaking the same language and we're all moving together. And we'll focus on the corporate targets for HRM moving up to 2050. We anticipate, well, we plan broad public engagement following that. We have a great project team helping to drive this initiative forward. With Shannon as our business lead, I'm very lucky to have members from all across the organization sitting on the core project team helping to deliver this program. And we really want to make sure that we're inclusive and that we reduce any potential blind spots as we engage with the community and as we look forward to adaptation and mitigation priorities. And you'll see we've got fire and emergency, GRIA, we have diversity and inclusion, again, to reduce potential blind spots. Finally, the key milestones. One I'll draw your attention to, we're sitting at fall 2018 right now. We're just about to issue our RFP for a modeling process. We'll be moving forward with our stakeholders to develop and vet those models. We'll move into public consultation. We anticipate the summer of 2019, ending at basically the end of December, the end of the calendar year in 2019. At that point in time, we'll have an implementation plan, a what we heard report, and we'll have the results of public consultation that we'll use to finalize a 2050 target for HRM and a plan which we can bring to council and committees as appropriate. And following deliberation, we'll look towards the Ccap implementation of the process. So thank you very much once again, and it's a pleasure.
Alex and Shannon, thank you very much for that very important presentation. Before we open it up to the colleagues on the floor, let everybody know that's here today. Towards the last part of our agenda today, we open up the floor to the public, and each person is able to come up and speak to any of the topics you've heard today, or in fact, any topic at all, just to let you know that. It's something you may want to give your opinion. So thank you again, Shannon and Alex. Colleagues, any questions from the floor? Any questions from the floor? Councilor Zarowski, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for noticing my subtle need to speak on this. Climate change has been on the radar for me for 40 years, and one of the reasons I got involved in municipal politics was because of the inaction on climate change, and I'm so pleased that we have two professionals like Alex and Shannon producing this document. My big concern in this is that we couch it in political terms. We don't want to scare people. But everything that I've read says that we're in a crisis. We've got a year, maybe two, to plan, which I'm really happy to see the 2-year plan that we will implement this by 2020. And we have 10 years to act. But I think it's important to note that it's 7.6 metric tons per 500,000. That's 15 tons per person per year, which is way above what the IPCC says that we need to be at. So we need to be at 1 ton per person if we're going to mitigate this by 2050. And so that means we go from 15 tons of CO2 into the atmosphere per person. We go down to 1 ton per person. And that, to me, is one part of it. The second part of it is if we do not, and this has to be made clear to council, that we have no alternative but to implement this. If we do not do this, the world as we know it, without any hyperbole involved in this, will be so dramatically different that we will be reacting to all sorts of things that we shouldn't have to react to. And in this report, I would urge you, I agree with everything that you said. I think it's absolutely spot on that we have to go to the 1.5 degrees Celsius. But I think it also needs to be made clear that this is non-negotiable. This is future. I'm future challenged. I'm an old fart. That means I don't have much of a future, but the people that I see sitting, some, many of them, are much younger than I am, and they've got to live with the decisions that we make in the next 50 years. And it goes by in a heartbeat, and if we fail to act, if we fail to implement this, and I think it's wonderful that you've laid out things in those terms, but I think you also must make it clear to council that this is critical, that if we do not implement this, doing something is not enough. If you do something, we still commit ourselves to an unacceptable rise in temperature on the Earth. And we're part of it. Right now, if we continue the way we're going, we will commit in the next 80 years to a 5.1 degrees Celsius if everybody continues to do what they're doing. Latest papers are telling us that we're looking at a 5 degrees Celsius rise in global temperature. And that is unthinkable. Much of the United States will be uninhabitable. And by uninhabitable, we're talking about desert temperatures with humidity approaching 65 degrees Celsius, which nobody can survive more than 20 minutes in that. Water problems, shortages on all levels. And so the criticality of this also extends into immigration. It also extends into other areas of our society. And we are the lead city. We are the lead city in the eastern seaboard of Canada. We're the largest city east of Quebec. We are the dominant city in Atlantic Canada. I want us to implement this. So it's too late to say, I don't want to be too verbose about this, but thank you for presenting this. What little hope I have rests in us being able to accept this, vote for this, and then implement it. And I would urge you in the strongest terms to lay out the scenario that happens if we do not implement this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any comments from Alex? No? Thank you very much, and thank you for your concerns, your warning, and we agree on the old part piece for sure. Councillor Blackburn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do have a question, but I think it might be the Vice Chair who would be able to answer this. I'm just wondering how this fits in with Council's request for the climate change advisor.
Sort of usually back and forth, but if there's no other comments on that, then go ahead, Councillor Rossi.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And so this fits in. This is one definite approach. But as we plan, as we move the city ahead, the climate change becomes a directorate through which we make all our decisions to make sure we stay on track. So this particular report points out the criticality of the effects of climate change and how to mitigate this. And so it creates a plan. But that does not mean that we get to stop after we get a plan in place. Everything has to be reviewed through the directorate. So if we make a decision on housing, if we make a decision on transportation, if we make a decision on implementing electric cars, we have to be able to have the resources to look at that through a lens of climate change. So that's really where the climate change directorate comes in. And it's only necessary because we're in such a critical position. So they're solving the immediate problem, hopefully. They're coming up to ways of reducing things. The climate change directorate is the model on which we base our lensing, how we look at things.
Okay. No, that's perfect. Thank you very much, and thank you so much for the presentation. The one word that really stood out in the presentation was transformational, and they described the actions that we need to take as transformational. And I see it from the perspective of, if we don't take these actions, then the results will absolutely be transformational. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Any other questions? Councillor Stretch, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, staff, for the presentation. I thought it was very balanced, and I appreciate the context that you're bringing forward. Just take me back a few years. I whispered to Kelly a number of years ago, Council set up targets for not too far from right this moment in time. And I understand this is an update and a further plan to take us well into the future, 2050. How did we measure as it relates to those marks that we set years ago leading up to 2020? Were we close? Did we make advancements? Can you just, Mr. Chair, comment on that? How we're doing so far?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So with respect to the 2020 target for corporate reduction in corporate greenhouse gas emissions, we're looking at a 30% reduction below 2008 levels. The latest corporate inventory we've done is for 2016-17. And at this point, we're tracking at about a third of the way toward that 30% target. However, I will add that in this last the last fiscal year, we've had the opportunity to make some excellent retrofits or conduct some excellent retrofits of municipal facilities that will inevitably advance us quite a bit further. And so we'll know just the way the reporting regime works. We'll know by 2022 with certainty how we did toward the 2020 target.
Well, that's encouraging, Mr. Chair. I mean, this is a work in progress, and I do appreciate Councillor Zarowski's passion. It is very real and heartfelt, but I think we have to find the balance. We are making progress. We're setting targets that I believe we have to all work toward to try and attain. But it is folks like Richard that are ringing alarm bells that I think we all have to be cognizant of and try to help our residents and our communities understand the importance and moving forward with a balanced approach. And I appreciate what you've brought forward today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stretch. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much to both of you once again. Very important topic. I would hopefully we'll have regular updates at environmental sustainability on where we are, especially after each month. So that'll be fantastic. Thank you both. Next up on the agenda is 12.1.2 Halifax Solar City Program Update and Extension. So first of all, colleagues, do we have some for the motion on the floor? And then I believe there's a presentation. Councillor Zarowski, would you mind putting the motion on the floor, please?
I move, as soon as I find my notes here, I move that the Environment Sustainability Standing Committee recommend that Regional Council approve the continuation, number one, approve the continuation of Solar City Program as a clean energy community-based program, and number two, direct staff to provide annual reports on the Solar City Program to the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee.
Second by Councillor Blackburn. I believe, first of all, before questions, we had a presentation, that's correct, and you moved on to something more? I think there's going to be a theme today, Shannon, is there not? And Ms. Denti is very pleased about the adjustments of life.
It's making me laugh, eh?
And the floor is yours, Shannon, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello again, Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee. On a similar vein, we would like to provide a brief update on the Solar City program. The program was approved for 3 years and is set to end in May of 2019. So this update is kind of the last 2.5 years of the program, which is different from the pilot. This is what happened after the pilot. I have with me Kevin Boutlier, who is our Solar City officer, and he's going to speak to some of these slides as well. So just a quick refresher on the Solar City program as it stands today. We provide financing for the full cost of solar technology systems, whether it be solar hot water, air, or electric photovoltaic systems, to eligible property owners, which could be homeowners, residential homeowners, nonprofits, places of worship, cooperatives, or charities. And this program uses an open market approach where participants are encouraged to get several quotes from different contractors and choose the fit that's right for them. So as of the end of October of this year, we've had more than 2,000 registrations. We've executed 199 contracts for systems. The total energy avoided for a year is 1.7 gigawatt hours, which equates to 1,200 tons of equivalent carbon dioxide. And we financed more than $4.25 million in systems. So I'm going to hand it over to Kevin to give you some more program specifics.
Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. So this graph here is showing the cumulative financing monthly throughout the course of the program from the onset. While things were fairly consistent to begin with, in 2018 there was quite an increase in participation. In February of 2018, we launched a very comprehensive marketing campaign that focused on print, radio, trade shows, and also bus ads, sorry. During that time, during the campaign, we saw 40 new system applications approved for a total project value of about $1 million. The marketing campaign wound down near the end of June, but the momentum was continued by the new Provincial Rebate program, which was announced at the end of June. During the course of the Provincial Rebate program, we saw another 90 applications approved for financing at a total cost of $2.25 million. In just October alone, we approved 40 system applications for just over $1 million in system costs. Throughout the course of 2018, we approved financing for $3.25 million in projects, which is about 75% of all the financing throughout the course of the program. So the Provincial Rebate Program, like I said, it was announced at the end of June and was officially launched on August 14th. So the Provincial Program is funded through the Low Carbon Economy Fund and administered through Efficiency Nova Scotia. The rebate is for residential property owners across the province, and it is for photovoltaic or solar electric systems only. The program is currently scheduled for a 4-year, it's supposed to be a 4-year program, and the rebate value is currently valued at $1 per watt up to a maximum of $10,000 or 40% of the system cost before taxes. What that looks like for the average property owner is the average residential system comes in at about 8.5 kilowatts, for a capital cost of about $24,000, so this rebate should take care of about 30% of that overall cost. We're working with Efficiency Nova Scotia and property owners to ensure that they successfully apply and are granted this rebate, and so far, since the rebate was announced at the end of June, we've helped property owners be approved for about $1 million in rebates through this fund. While the program, as Shannon mentioned, offers financing to solar hot air, solar hot water, and solar electric systems, there's a clear appetite for solar electric or photovoltaics. This shift has been largely driven by increased financial incentive programs like the Solar City program, the incentive program through Efficiency Nova Scotia and the province, and as well the continuing reduction in system costs. Of that 199 systems that we approved for financing, 160 have been solar electric at about $4 million in total financing. On the notion of reducing system costs, we've tracked about 200 system proposals through our program, and as you can see, the cost of the equipment has reduced dramatically. So in 2016, when the program started, the average cost per system was about $3.10 per watt. Today, the average resident can get a system for about $2.60 per watt. With the rebate, that is now down to about $1.60 per watt, which makes the average payback period from about 12 years down to about 8, which is really a tipping point for a lot of property owners. With all these factors, financial programs, a reduction in system costs, and a fantastic net metering program that we have here in the province, Nova Scotia is really the spot to go solar. So most of the systems that have been installed and approved have been residential. However, the program is open to places of worship, co-ops, charities, and non-profits. There have been 2 notable systems that have been installed that are not residential. The first is in Councillor Blackburn's district, where the Brown Hall and the Rebate Community Centre installed a system back in 2017, in the summer of 2017. And then Deputy Mayor Mancini's district, just this fall, actually installed this system on the Woodlawn United Church, which is a 48 kilowatt system, the largest under the program to date.
You do things big in
This is it, right?
So just to finish off, the Solar City program is an example of how HRM as a municipality can influence some of those emissions that we don't have direct control over. So it's programs that are community-based and incentive-based that can educate and change behavior amongst our community members. So we are recommending to extend the program beyond May to take advantage of the momentum that we're seeing right now and to continue to incentivize more solar, more renewable, and less greenhouse gas emissions in our city. Thank you.
Well, once again, thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you, and it's amazing that we have this expertise within our own house. It's fantastic. Thanks for the presentation. Motion's on the floor, we'll go to Councilor Zarowski first and then you, Councilor Henry. Councilor Zarowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation that is elucidating. I guess program, it didn't tell us at all, any place, how much we lowered CO2, like what impact it's having on climate change. The rubric was all about money, and money is important, but if we are to look at, there it is, the one area, one tiny area, I missed it, thank you for bringing that up, but it really needs to be put into context. It needs to be put into context all the time, and that's why we need a lens to say, okay, so we're doing all this, we're spending $13 million, and we're going to lower it by 1,200 tons of CO2. Now, what does that mean? How much does that mean in the big picture? And so, while I want to see solar voltaics happening, while I want to see all this happening, and I want to know about the cost. Cost is important. Climate change is going to be expensive. I also want to know how much I am lowering overall, what we've done in the past, where we need to go with this particular program. And while you're very concerned about, and most councillors are very concerned about the dollars behind it, and that's of course what we've encouraged you to do. But with the Climate Change Directorate, we will then start to look at it with an additional lens. Not with the only lens, but an additional lens. And so I'd like to know where we want to go with this. What is the plan? In 10 years, are we looking at reducing home electric consumption, which will lower CO2 by 40%? Will it match the IPCC? That's what I want to know. Will it be better than that, or do we continue to fall behind? I would like Councillor Stretch to continue to be able to, and he will hold you fiscally responsible. Also, I want to make sure that his business is sustainable from a climate point of view. Because if we have climate change, your cranberry crop may be in jeopardy in 10 years. And we don't want to see that. So I need to know where CO2 is being reduced with the effort that we're making on this. And so it's important to me. Can you contextualize this for me?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the Council and Committee, I think that one of the issues right now is that we don't have a community-wide target to measure against. We have a corporate target. We don't have a community target, and that is what the Ccap, or the climate strategy, is going to establish in consultation with all the key stakeholders. So we're going to set a 2050 target, and then maybe some incremental targets to get us to the 2050 target, and then we will track everything we do against that. Solar City is playing a role in the adoption of renewable energy, supporting a burgeoning renewable energy solar industry within the municipality and the province, really, and really Atlantic Canada, and reducing emissions in that way. It's just one piece of a very large puzzle of efforts that need to happen to get us to where we need to be.
So, more button pushing. If I were to, the annual reduction of 1,200 tons of CO2 means what?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the Councillor. So that annual reduction is all the systems total, and that is based off of the current greenhouse gas emission factors that for Nova Scotia Power.
So we're emitting 15 million tons per year, and you're saying this is just going to give us a 1,200 ton reduction?
For these 200 systems per year.
200 systems. Okay.
That's just 200 residential systems.
Okay.
30 seconds, Councilor.
Okay. We'll leave it at that. I guess I made my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Up next is Councillor Hensby.
Thank
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions. I'm trying to read through the statistics here regarding the enhanced net metering stuff. And I'm reading, for instance, on the total number of interconnections across the province is 453. Of that, 160 in Halifax County, which is limitation. So we got 35% of that. I'd like to know in regards to out of those 160 applicants, that's the beginning of the process, because I see another figure here. It says we just have 55, so I assume that was just the solar application for 2017 only, I assume. And the 453 and 160 from the full program. I'd like to know the difference in the numbers. Is one an accumulation of who's up to date for all the programs that have been initiated? And is 55 just the only 2017 calendar year only program? Also,
Sorry, Councilor Hesler, could you speak into the mic so they can pick it up on the Facebook Live, please?
also I want to clarify in regards to how many people are signing up for our municipal program versus the provincial program, or are there some joint applications? So there's a statistical breakdown of that. And also, I'd like to know if we can get a postal code information in regards to where are these units to be installed across the municipality. Are they downtown, or are they suburbia, or are they in rural areas? I cannot see any of this data here. All I know is I see Halifax County as being all of HRM, but I have no realization of where these 160 customers have taken advantage of the programs. Where are they located? Also, in regards to an email I received this past week, I'd like to read it to you. Hello, David. I'd like to advise you of a problem with no broadband service concerning my solar panels on the roof. I'm excited to have them, however, they rely on Wi-Fi to monitor their progress. Apparently they work, but should there be a problem, we are blind. We are all doing our part for the environment, but are curtailed while the effort because modern equipment expects modern technology. Where in some rural areas we don't have the connectivity yet, so here we once again, one program leads to another in regards to rural broadband technologies and cellular coverage, where they have an impact on Solar City compatibility. So I'd like to get those kind of statistics as possible in the information report, supplementary report, more of the distribution of where the 160 HRM customers, where they're geographically located from the municipality. I'd like to know who's taking up the program.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the councillor. So for the first question, that 55% are about 50%. So Nova Scotia Power releases a net metering report once per year. At the end of 2017, they released the report. And based on systems that were approved under our program from post-2018, it was about 55% of all systems installed in HRM during that year. So going forward, we don't actually have those results yet because the 2018 report has not been released.
So, in regards to locations?
Yeah, so with the locations, the two mainly rural districts, District 1 and 2, about $1 million in financing have been committed for those two districts. So we do have statistics that we can provide you with, just not with us right now.
I'd like to know in regards to, say, $1 million in application, but I'd like to know in regards to how many applicants that is, like how far they are or located. Are they Portishead, are they Muscatine, or Muscatine Valley? I'd like to know where these programs can take advantage of. And the other question I have is, have our municipal buildings themselves taken advantage of? I'm thinking of the Muscatine Harbor would be a possibility of all our routes, perhaps getting on board with this kind of stuff. So I wasn't sure if there's a game plan for us corporately to look at some of our own infrastructure.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, we currently have about 27 corporate solar energy systems installed. Most of them are on fire stations throughout the municipality. I would say, so there's about 27 that are currently installed. We're not able to take advantage of the rebate program. It is just through efficiency or through for residential property owners. So there is another program, the Community Solar Program, that is offered to municipalities, universities, and nonprofits, and we have not taken advantage of that yet.
Well, last comment would be, Mr. Chair, with regards to perhaps our fire EMO and our community groups to look at this as ways of making our designated comfort centers more compatible, more independent. Because we try to look at trying to put in plug-in generators or portable generators capacities for these places, but if we have solar panels, perhaps another means added to these facilities, perhaps become more independent in regards to what the climate may be, in regards to what the conditions may be. So a lot of these generators depend on fuel to get to them, perhaps we have more self-reliance on independent systems, such as solar power panels, would make it even more efficient for us to have these comfort centers.
Councilor Hensby, thank you very much. I think some very valid, hopefully maybe you can come back with the locations that the council is asking you about, the breakdown, and maybe there's, for colleagues, there's a motion here that we created about looking at our other facilities, the comfort centers, as you suggest, to we give some guidance to staff to come up with a strategy for that. Thank you. Councilor Fresh is the next, and then Councilor Blackburn will have you. Councilor Fresh, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you once again to staff. Great presentation and a great program that I do support. Mr. Chair, I noticed how our learned colleagues across the way both used items that are important to me to link this up. And I think that's so important, as I referred to in the previous comment about defining, finding a balance. So obviously, Councillor Hensby appealed to something very important to me, as it is to him, and that is rural broadband. So if any initiative can help support the greater introduction of that, then I think that will serve us on both fronts. And of course, Councillor Zarowski knows how to push my buttons as it relates to corporate, my corporate component outside of council. And I can tell you, after the spring floods and the snap frosts this year, we can't take any more jeopardy. So your point is well taken. I think that is something that we have to continue to do as we ask the business community to buy into initiatives like this or others, is to link those two and the importance it is to their business. Just a quick question, Mr. Chair, to staff. So this is a program not much different than an LIC, local improvement church. The municipality, once they say a resident qualifies, and Mr. what are there certain criteria? Is it an income level? What type of qualification, just in a nutshell, does a residential home, for example, have to show you to qualify?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, property owner just must be in good standing with the municipality. So all property taxes must be up to date, financing granted.
So that's not too bad. Then pay your taxes if you qualify. And HRM then will step up and help finance over time at a reasonable interest rate.
It doesn't have to qualify, so just for clarification, the home has to have enough light and sunshine coming on it.
Yeah, I guess there's two steps. The first step would be the property owner registers online, puts their property information in. Our finance department will check to make sure everything is up to date, and then we start the process of investigating what solar technology might be best for them, if any.
Sure, okay. That's a very important clarification. I know also further to Councillor Hensby's question, there have been a few of these systems go in my area, the Waverley Fall River, Muscatine Valley corridor, and people are pleased. And I've heard nothing but accolades for this program. I do support what you've done and support moving forward. And to the point that was made, 1,200 tons is 1,200 tons. We're moving in the right direction. Maybe not as quickly as some would like, but it's one step at a time. And I think you're doing your part to contribute, and I thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stretch. Councillor Blackburn, you're next, and Councillor Rossi will come afterwards. Go ahead, Councillor. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question about the key performance indicators on page 3. Just notice that we've got registrations clocking in at 1,979 and executed Solar City participants at 160. I'm just wondering if you folks have any of the data or any information on what is preventing people from taking that next step. It seems like we're getting a lot of folks to register, but when it all settles in, we've got 160 who have signed off on the agreement, and I'm just wondering if we know what is preventing them from going all the way.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So We actually did a survey at the end of 2017 with the I think it was about 1,500 or 1,600 registrants at that point, asking what the main barriers were, and the upfront cost was the key. Even with the financing, the upfront cost was just too much for them. So we have seen, we haven't really done a stock take yet, but the property owners that had said that in the survey, some of them are coming back now with the new rebate to install the system. So.
Are we seeing the price of these going down as the technology improves?
Yes, we are. Yeah, so with the rebate especially, we're at like $1.60 a watt from $3.10 2 years ago. So in addition to cost, and some people register their interest not knowing that a PV system for an average home runs around $20,000, $16,000 to $22,000 typically. So that right away could be like, oh, I thought it was $5,000. That's not something I'm willing to consider right now. But there was a whole host of other reasons why we go from 2,000 to 200. So some weren't residents within a municipality, some were not in good financial standing. It's not just your property taxes, it's any LIC and any other property that you own. What were some of the other reasons?
Essentially not suitable site for solar, that was the majority of some.
Right, yeah, the solar feasibility is another piece of that. So if they had shade trees, then we don't want them to go chopping down all their shade trees, then they'd go with some different energy efficiency option.
So just because you register through the process, it may be determined that your home is not suitable for it. Okay. Thank you for that. And I know that Councillor Mancini, you're quite keen on this. That is a thing of beauty.
It is.
And certainly like the cross on the top, that's a nice touch. But I got to tell you, we are small but mighty out of Beaver Bank, because that brown hall, at one point this summer, apparently they were the highest electricity producing building in all of Nova Scotia Power's stock. So it's a small building, and for any nonprofits or charities who are thinking about this, it's been a game changer for the Brown Hall, which is a nonprofit group. What they have managed to save on their electrical bills and the money that they now have coming in, it's allowed them to expand their programming, to do many more things in the community. So it's been a win-win-win. Thank you.
Glad to hear that. Maybe we can make them part of the next campaign, but by all means. Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. And Councillor Zarowski, for yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just going to follow up quickly on Councillor Blackburn's observation. Can we go back to the slide that shows the change in cost? I believe you had one that showed the declining cost of the...
So dollars per watt?
Yeah, that's it. So is this going to... Do you expect the linearity of this curve to continue downward? And so we're at 2018. What is the tipping point that you think will drive more uptake? Are you expecting to see it dip to below $2 a watt coming in, which of course would lower the total cost of the installation of your system? What do you think the tipping point is?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, I would say for larger systems, you can see close to about $2 per watt. There are some contractors that are coming in below $2 per watt. I'd say that the key tipping point, and especially with our financing, is if a property owner can install a system where what they are saving from the system offsets their electricity bill completely, well then that's a tipping point. It's almost a no-brainer for those folks to install. So I would say with the rebate, we're pretty well close to that tipping point.
Okay, so you would, what are we now at, 168, I think you said?
199 to the end of...
199. So the goal would be to get into what? Do you have a target? A plan?
There were some targets established when the 3-year program was approved, and they were kind of taking the pilot program and tripling it. So there was a target for a number of installs, which was, I think, 450 a year. Is it a year? Which is a bit of an outrageous number.
So we missed
But, pardon?
We exaggerated it and missed it then.
Well, it's just, I think they took a guess based on pilot participation, what we might see with the program. But really, you can measure based on number of installs, but I think it's important to look at total energy impact and total dollars spent, and this program is far overreaching what it would have been if it were the hot water systems of the pilot. Right?
And so the provincial program, they are targeting 500 installs per year over 4 years. That's somewhat unrealistic, and the reason why I say that is because when Nova Scotia Power released their report in 2017, from 2011 to 2017, there was only 450 installs in all of Nova Scotia. So for PV, so we're certainly at the early adopters stage.
So, what about, we have a lot of new construction happening. Okay, just one quick, thank you for your latitude. What about new construction? Because if we build it, mandate it to be built into a new subdivision for those places that are applied, it's sort of like electricity or water or sewer. Do we look at that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor, under the current municipal charter, we are unable to enforce those provisions on new developments.
Something else to add to the list of our friends?
More letters to be written.
Thank you, Councilor Zarowski. Any other questions? If there are no other questions, we can have a call for the question.
Question on the motion.
Question has been called for. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion is carried. Both gentlemen, Mr. Shannon, thanks very much. Next item on the agenda does not involve Shannon, so the next item on the agenda is 12.1.3, council appointments to boards and committees. Can I have someone put the motion on the floor, please? Councilor Blackburn, please, thank you. 12.1.3.
I so move. There we go. I so move that the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee 1 nominate one member to the Executive Standing Committee for a term to November 2020. 2, nominate one member to the Halifax Regional Water Commission for a term to November of 2020. 3, nominate one member for the National Zero Waste Council for a term to November of 2019. And 4, nominate the chair or designate from the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee membership to the Community Design Advisory Committee for a term to November 30th, 2020. I so move.
Second. Second by Councilor Zarowski. So, colleagues, if you go to your package, item 12.13, on the back side of it, we have looking for someone from the Executive Standing Committee. In the past, it's typically been the chair of the committee, but I'm sitting on that committee in my role as deputy mayor anyway, so I'm not sure if disappeared, man. How does he do that? I don't know. Disappears. Kevin, what's the protocol for that? So we just have look for someone who that expresses interest, and nominate that person. So we're looking coming from the committee who maybe Councilor Hesby?
Just a question, Mr. Chairman, in regards to, since the chair is normally the person designated for that committee, since you're already on the past deputy, would it fall to the vice chair then to assume that responsibility?
It depends on the committee and the chair. If you wish to have the vice chair be your designated, audit and finance does that with Councilor Nicol, then that could be what you go for.
Sorry?
Okay, Councilor Nicol is the representative on audit and finance, and she's the vice chair of audit and finance, so it could work that way as well.
Good. Councilor Zarowski?
I have no problem with that.
So Councilor Hesby nominates Councilor Zarowski.
Nomination. Nomination.
Second. Second by Councilor Stretch. Councilor Zarowski, you have no problem with that?
No, do I get a speech?
No. You're doing good, Councilor.
If they can speak for reconsideration.
Is there any other nominations for that role? Seeing none, thank you, Councilor Zarowski. The next up is the Halifax Regional Water Commission. So you can see colleagues who's sitting on that now. Councillor Stretch, Councillor Zarowski, and Councillor Blackburn. So the process again, Councillor Stretch?
I'd like to, thank you, Chair, I'd like to speak to that. I currently am the appointee of this committee on the Water Commission, and I'll be completing my third term, obviously the last 2 years plus 4 years prior. So I think in this case I would like to respectfully not accept the nomination if there was one forthcoming. My question through you to the clerk's office, does the member that this committee puts forward have to come from this committee, or can we take this back to regional council if there was another member that I would like to see on the commission?
Currently, Currently, there are no stipulations on whether or not the environment sustainability standing committee has to nominate a member from the committee to council. So, if there are other members of council that have made expressed an interest in serving on the committee, that name could be on board as well at this time.
I'm not so sure that he's made an interest, but I want to nominate Matt Whitman. But at the same time, I see Councillor Zarowski's name down here and would be prepared to nominate Councillor Zarowski if he would accept. But in lieu of that, and especially concerning Councillor Whitman's definite interest in the Water Commission, especially bringing the meetings to the public forum, which has happened, I think he would be a good fit. It would fit him, and I think it would benefit the Commission. But I'd like to hear, prior to that, because I don't want to overstate or overlook Councillor Zarowski in this case, I would not.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Zarowski, and then Councillor Henry next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just, after quick consultation with Councillor Blackburn, she is willing to continue standing for it, and since I'm on the Executive Standing Committee, and I will probably put my name down for the National Zero Waste, all things being equal, I would like to have Councillor Blackburn continue her tenure. And she's already on, and she would like to continue, so I will withdraw my name if she is willing to continue with that.
Just to follow up on that, and I'll step down. My understanding was that you were appointed by council, not by this committee. Is that correct?
I was just about to ask the question of Kevin.
Kevin, get your-
Sorry, I was just about to ask the question of Kevin. I'm on the Water Commission board, but I have no idea how I got there.
We're paying attention one day, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Blackburn. So the way that the Water Commission is structured is there's one member that's appointed through the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee, and then 3 other members are appointed through the Executive Standing Committee. So I believe you were appointed through the Executive Standing Committee, and Councillor Stretch was appointed through the Environment.
Is Councillor Blackburn's term up also?
Correct, yeah, so you're up for reappointment as well if you choose to serve. And we have a list that we do, a survey for those councillors that are interested. So we have that have responded favorably in wanting to serve on the Water Commission is Councillor, through the survey that we did a couple months ago, Councillor Stretch, Walker, Zarowski, Nickel, and Blackburn. So those are the names that have come forward, and your name's on there.
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Hensky, before we go.
Well, you clarified through the appointment process that there are 4 current members are now, 4 that expressed the interest. So, Councillor Blackburn was appointed by the old executive committee appointed. But now, does the executive committee also have to go through this reappointment evaluation, or perhaps we put Lisa, Councillor Blackburn on as our resident from the environment standing?
You could, yes.
Would you like to nominate?
Therefore, it frees up the executive to appoint someone else.
An opportunity for that, I understand.
Okay.
Councillor Stretch,
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. That's why I'm
Okay, so
Sorry about that. So Councillor Zarowski's name is still on the list, so his name will be brought forward to the Executive Standing Committee for consideration as well. And we're waiting for the Executive Standing Committee to be formed, and then once it's formed, the newly constituted committee will then make
Make the decisions on the composition of Halifax Water go forward. Yeah.
Councillor Stretch?
Okay, well, that brings great clarification, I appreciate that. So if we want to assure that Councillor Blackburn stays on the commission, which I definitely do, then it would be prudent for this committee to appoint her now and not have to take our chances later. And then I'd like to nominate Councillor Blackburn.
Second for Councillor Zarowski. Councillor Blackburn, do you accept that nomination?
I do accept, yes, and I would like to stay on the Water Commission. I also serve on the Environment, Health and Safety Committee as part of the Water Commission. I would like to continue that work, so thank you.
And thank you for that work, Councillor. No other nominations? And so, question on motion to nominate Councillor Blackburn. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carried. Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. The third item is National Zero Waste Council, and Councillor Zarowski has been on that role, and as he indicated earlier, I think he still wants to continue on that. So we have a nomination for Councillor Zarowski. Nominated by Councillor Hensby, second by Councillor Stretch. Councillor Zarowski has a nod of agreement. I was to say Councillor Kevin. Is that the motion, Kevin? Councillor?
So Chairman seeing to committee. The other thing that we need to do sort of administratively is appoint an alternate, and through various motions of committee and council going back to 2016 and 17 is that the manager of solid waste is the alternate to the National Zero Waste Committee. So I would just want to put that out there so that if you can move that as well, and we'll ensure that there's an alternate just in case you can't make one of the telephone meetings, and the manager of solid waste would then be able to participate on behalf of the HRM.
So it was the solid waste. Councillor Hensby?
I have no problem with that process. I was kind of curious, so in that capacity, if that was to step up to the plate, there's a zero waste council that can votes of any sort. But here we have an elected official one position and an unelected official another, but they have the same authority on the council.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, there are not, to my reflection, we wrote a report on this, but there are no real decisions. It's more for information sharing. So it would be really rare that Mr. Kelleher would have to make decisions on behalf of the organization of presenting policies.
I would just need to have the burden on them.
So, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
In the last 2 years, it's just been an information session, so there are no participatory decisions that have to be made. You just get the information, you bring it back, and you have a look at what other folks are doing in regard to non-zero waste. It's an information session, just a representative from that, so it wouldn't matter whether it was an elected official or staff.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So was there a nomination for Councillor Zarowski? Yeah. Councillor has been nominated. No further nomination. Second by Councillor Stretch. All in favor?
Aye.
And that's been carried. Thank you, Councillor.
Still no speech?
No speech. The speech at 3 o'clock at the down the street. There's a nice restaurant down the street. I know.
Do you have a soapbox out there for it?
The last item is the Community Design Advisory Committee. You can see a list of current members. And the interested party is Councillor Cleary, who is not here today. We have a nomination for Councillor
I
Cleary.
move that Councillor.
Councillor nominated by Councillor Stretch, seconded by Councillor Zarowski. Are there any other nominations for that role?
Question. Yeah. I noticed that I'm on the Ccap committee. Do I remain on there, or am I taken off if Councillor Cleary comes in?
Councillor, I'd rather work, Kevin, if you
Oh, I'm on behalf of the Transportation Committee. All right. I've been answered. Thank you, Councillor Hensby.
You answer your own questions. How often do you answer your own questions, Councillor? On a daily basis. See no other nomination. All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion is passed. So, Mr. Clerk, what's the process? We have to go, do you have enough information here? Do we have to go back to the motion? And we have to vote on the motion, at least, right?
Say that because we had voted motion, I think it's we just amend those specific nominations.
Okay. So, Councillor Blackburn, would you mind, so we have the motion. We read the motion, correct? And so, if you just make the amendments of, do you have a list of everybody?
Gotcha. All right. It is, I so move that the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee nominate Councillor Richard Zarowski, to the Executive Standing Committee for a term to November 2020. Nominate Councillor Lisa Blackburn to the Halifax Regional Water Commission for a term to November 2020. To nominate Richard Zarowski to the National Zero Waste Council for a term to November 2019. And to nominate Councillor Sean Cleary to the Community Design Advisory Committee as the representative from the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee for a term to November 30th, 2020. I so move.
Second amendment by Councillor Stretch, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, that's carried. So now we're going to vote on the main motion and call for that question.
Question?
As we call for, all in favor?
Aye.
And that motion has been carried. Thank you very much, colleagues. Next item on the agenda is the one that you're all waiting for, our 2019 Environment Sustainability Standing Committee meeting schedule. I know they've been waiting all day for this one. Can we have that motion being put on the floor? Councilor Rossi, would you mind?
I move that the Environment Sustainability Standing Committee approve the 2019 meeting schedule as outlined in attachment 1 of the staff report dated November 6, 2019.
Second?
Second by Councilor Blackburn. Any questions on that? Seeing none, call for the question. Questions been called for, all in favor?
Aye.
And we now have a schedule for 2019. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda was an add item to the agenda. Let's see here. This one would be 12.1.5, single-use item reduction strategy. Colleagues, are okay if I do this from the chair position?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So, recommendation into this approach to on first, that's correct? So, let me put the following motion on the floor. It is recommended that the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee recommend that Regional Council direct staff to 1, collaborate with the industrial, commercial, institutional, ICI sector to develop a voluntary waste reduction strategy for the consumption of single-use items, focusing on plastic carry-out bags, utensils, cups, containers, straws, and other waste items that may be identified through this collaboration, subject to approval of the necessary program funding as part of the 2020-21 budget. Number 2, hang on, just 3 more to go. Number 2, initiate an education campaign for residents in the ICI sector focused on the reduction of single-use plastics. 3, consult with industry, internal stakeholders, the public, and the Regulatory Modernization Advisory Committee on the development of the regulatory framework required to prohibit the distribution of single-use plastics in Halifax Regional Municipality. Should the initial voluntary program fail to achieve the acceptable results by December 31st, 2019, and 4, review and update the 2009 HRM corporate guidelines for greening meetings and catering requirements. So moved. Second by Councilor Zarowski. So colleagues, as I mentioned in our opening today, this report, we just received it at the end of the day yesterday. So my ask here is that I would like to discuss it today, but I would like to ask for your indulgence and defer any vote on it until the next meeting, which is December the 6th. And at that meeting, we'll have a decision and a vote, and hopefully the results of that item will then go to the November 11th Regional Council agenda. So I'm asking if, do we vote on that, or how does that work?
So today we could have a vote to refer the item to the December 6th meeting, and at that time, if we wanted to go on the December 11th Regional Council agenda, we could make that, we could add as part of the motion as well.
So can we have the discussion, or even some debate now on it?
Yes.
So do we vote first, or wait to have discussion and then vote on the request to defer?
We can have a discussion and then vote on it.
Colleagues, are we okay with that? Councilor Zarowski? Yeah.
I dislike extended discussions where I try to remember what the salient points were.
Because you're the old fart piece you mentioned earlier? Yes.
It is so gracious of you to point out my failings. I would prefer to have this set aside so that we can, as a council, individually look this over. I understand that people have come to look at this, but quite frankly, I feel I haven't had enough time to really go through the ramifications of this. And having a discussion now and then a discussion afterwards strikes me as being counterintuitive. I like to be able to discuss things as they happen and then be able to make those decisions after consultation rather than trying to figure out. What we'll wind up doing is having the same arguments over again on the second time. And so it perhaps will give us a bit of a learning curve as to how to do this. So my preference is to say, thank you very much, let's go away, let's think about this, and have the entire debate done the next session.
Thank you, Councillor Roski. I appreciate your opinion on that. Councillor Stretch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Councillor Zarowski. I tend to agree, and I think if I'm understanding your intent is that you want to defer this until the December 6th meeting. I agree that if we're going to defer the decision, then we should defer the discussion. I, no different than any of you, only just recently received the documentation and was given a copy just a few minutes ago. So I'd like the opportunity to read it, to look at the nuances, the implications, etc. And I think it would likely, based on that, likely be premature to discuss it if we're saying the reason we're going to defer is that we haven't had a chance to read it. So I think if there's no motion on the floor further to your motion, I move deferral of the entire item until December 6th.
Second.
So we have the request to defer, seconded by Councillor Zarowski. So we vote on that deferral, is that correct? Yeah. So all in favor of that deferral?
Debate on the motion.
I'm sorry?
Debate on the motion of the
Okay.
floor. Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to know in regards to the process. I understand that the timeliness of trying information, trying to get ahead of the schedule or ahead of the curve.
Sorry, Councillor, you're speaking to your mic so they pick you up. Thank you.
I understand the urgency in regards to trying to get this to head of council in early December, but receiving the information here today is one thing. But second of all, we have also had some people here today that may want to speak on the matter. So if we defer this matter today, will the general public or public participation allowed to speak on the item? Because we've also received correspondence from the Retail Council of Canada, which not circulated to us today, but it was sent to us by email at 12:23 this afternoon. So I just referred that to the clerk for his information. But I'd like to know in regards to will we be allowing presentations or at least public participation on the subject matter here today. So therefore we can listen to the concerns and ponder it after we review the material.
I'll let the clerk answer in a second. My understanding is yes, because at the end is public participation. They can discuss anything they wish, including this item. So, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, the chair is correct. Generally speaking, for public participation, we have members of the public that allowed to.
And I agree with you, Councillor Hensby. That was my concern of wanting to have some discussion, but I'm okay with my colleagues. Anything further, Councillor Hensby?
No.
Councillor Zarowski?
I see this as the same thing. The public hasn't had a real chance to review this. And I would like to, any more than we've had a chance to review this, and I dislike splitting things up. I understand it's inconvenient. I understand the process is not ideal. But if we're going to discuss this in the entirety, I would request that we have the public come back again and learn from this experience that in the case of something like single-use plastic, which has been contentious, I would like the public involved and engaged, and I would like to be able, as a councillor, to be able to get the information from the public at the time that we are discussing it, not to split it up.
I understand that, Councillor Zarowski. The procedure is we cannot dictate to what the public chooses to speak on during public participation. So that's totally up to the public. They can come back again, so we can't deny that. So
Understand. I have no difficulty.
Councillor Hensby, last item on this?
So in regards to process, and some of the representations here today, for instance, Retail Council President of the Ecology Actress, I was also present.
Yeah.
Instead of just having 5 minutes of public participation, could they go on, make a request to make a formal presentation to the committee and have 10 minutes instead of 5?
That's absolutely correct.
Yes, that's correct. So,
They do both.
yeah, they could submit that to request to make a formal presentation to the agenda review committee, and that would be subject to approval, and they would be afforded attendance and issues.
Thank you. So there's a motion on the floor to defer this item, including the discussion until the December 6th meeting. Sorry, Councillor Fresh, thank you.
Just for clarification, we're moving pretty fast, I want to understand. So the motion on the floor is now to defer council's or committee's discussion and decision. But obviously, we can't preclude what anyone is going to say, and nor should we. So if somebody wants to step up and have a few words, then they're entitled. But the advice I would give is keep your powder dry until the meeting, where really it's going to be needed. But I would be more than welcome to hear from the public. Just want to make sure we weren't precluding.
Thank you for that clarification.
Or they come back a second time with a longer time.
Exactly.
That's right. Thank you for that. So there's a motion on the floor to defer. We have a second here. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay.
And one opposed. That motion is carried. Thank you for that. Again, those of you here that wish to speak on any topic, you'll have the opportunity as soon as we come to the end of the agenda. All right, so that was 12.1.5. We have 12.2, members of standing committee. There are none. There's no motions. We have nothing for in-camera, but we do have in-camera minutes. Could we have someone put forward to approve the in-camera minutes? Councilor Blackburn, who's second? Seconded by Councilor Stretch. All in favor?
Aye.
That's been carried. Those minutes are approved. Are there any additional items, Mr. Stewart?
No, there are no additional items.
And any notice of motions? Seeing none. So this is the point in time where we do have public participation. Anybody from the public is welcome to come forward. You, not you, Councilor Johnson, you've already had your speech today.
I'm just requesting a short recess, not too much coffee.
Because you're an old, what again? Yes. All right, so let's just take, we'll just take a 5-minute break, folks, and then we'll open up the public participation. Thank you. All right, folks, if you take your seats, please.
I've seen the video. I think it was a great presentation.
Thank you very much, folks. Councilor Zerowski, you feeling better?
I did my horoscope.
That's good. Thank you very much. You know, folks, before we move on to public participation, I do want to acknowledge some staff here that worked very hard on the single-use plastic reduction strategy. And if you can acknowledge yourself here in the room, Shannon Media, Shannon, where are you? Shannon, we all know Shannon already. I want to acknowledge Shannon Betts, are you in the room? Is Shannon here? No. And then Lori Lewis is here. I know she was here. The three of them worked very hard on getting this report to us today, and I truly appreciate all three of your efforts on that. Thank you very much. And I think deferring it is not a bad thing. It gives everybody an opportunity to discuss it with what you've heard. So to all three of you, and Shannon's not here, if you think pass it up. Go ahead. The other Shannon, that'd be great. Thank you all three of you. So again, this is the public participation part of our meeting. Anybody can come forward. You have 5 minutes to give your presentation. We ask that you direct your comments to the chair. When you come forward to the mic, please give us your name and the community that you live in. If you live in Dartmouth, you get 5 extra points. And I'll also let everybody know when you're down to 1 minute left, always acknowledge that you have 1 minute remaining. Sir, good afternoon. No stranger to the Dartmouth Community Council. Please give us your name and the community you come from, and then the floor is yours.
Okay, my name is Shalom Vanderbilt. I represent a regional group called the Soil and Water Conservation Society of Halifax, but I only made one presentation to this committee itself. Most of my presentations have been to regional plan going back to year 2000, and many certain issues.
I'm sorry, could you make sure the mic is close to you and you push the button so that it's green?
I've pushed on it.
Just push it once. Just wait a moment.
Yeah,
Wait. Oh, it's good. You're good. No, just the one time. Hang on. Leave it. Push it once again. Sorry.
Keep it green.
There you go. Leave it like that.
It's green up.
Yeah. Okay, you're good. No, you're good, Shalom. And then just once again, would you introduce yourself and don't push anymore. No, you're good. Just stop.
Okay.
Introduce yourself one more time, please.
Okay. My name is Shalom Vanderbilt, and I'm by education as a knowledge specialist in lakes. I'm also an environmental engineering background, and we set up a group called Soil and Water Conservation Society in Metro Halifax way back, and we have many professors from Ontario and US specializing in various parts, and limnology is part of biology, by the way, not engineering. And last month I gave a submission, I hope you all of them read it, about potential blue-green toxins, which is a very important thing, and it can even affect the neurological health. There is a whole draft of papers, and from our website called lakes.tribal.org, I put a lot of information on it. And I only gave the lakes which were sampled by HRM during 2006 to 2011 and compared them to historical data going back to the 70s. Okay, but we have done about 2,000 lakes. It's probably the largest project in Eastern Canada. And but I only selected them to compare, and I have a good and bad news. Good news is that the lakes have really not changed over the last 30, 40 years. Even though a lot of people complain, I guess many people are more environmentally conscious now. But if you compare with what's called in my first column is models. Modeling means you can actually model, just like the manager Marino was speaking about what do you call CO2. You can actually model the quality of the lakes in phosphorus, only phosphorus, which is the main thing, going back to when human civilization first started. So it could be 2,000, 3,000 years old. And then Queen's University, under a huge program, $750,000 did some of the lakes, and that was pre-industrial. This is phosphorus. So comparing those phosphorus values to not only HRM's values, but also to our group also in samplings of the 1970s, the lakes are not good. But compared to where I come from in India, these lakes are beautiful. So it depends on comparisons. The best lakes are actually in Councillor Stretch's backyard, and I'm not saying because I just know them, but they're the best lakes there. I don't know how they kept it, because there's also farms there. Now, if you can, this is our main homepage. If you can scroll down and click on what's called, okay, scroll down until you see the manhole. So, yeah, that manhole, if you click on it, in the old days, we used to produce TV shows and from Shaw Cable and Losac. This is one of them, and it features John Shepherd, who used to be the county drainage engineer, and then he moved to Halifax, was in charge of what do you call environment management services. Then he moved to Halifax Water and became a director. He's a retired man. It shows the experimental project which was carried out first like Lower Sackville with around $300,000, some of it from Environment Canada, some of it the county. This is the county now. This shows what the individual can do. Because I always watch your videos from home, I'm too lazy to come here, and it's better that way. And I remember Councillor Carson saying, the public should do its part. So John Shepherd explains in simple English what the public can do. And the host is one of our members who was in the military, Captain Mike Shacklock. He used to live in Bedford. He doesn't live in Nova Scotia anymore. And I tend to go into a lot of science, as some of the councillors would remember, going back to the county days. But these people talk in simple terms. So I'm getting old. I'm approaching close to 80, and I don't know how long will I live.
Almost as old as Councillor Zarowski.
I'm older than him, I think. But probably when I die, our websites will all probably not continue. We have 200 web pages, but these ones are on YouTube, and they'll be there in perpetuity. And the first leg was a demonstration project. It didn't fully succeed, but that's the way to cut down phosphorus. And finally, when I said in the community council, it's not just fertilizer. It's dog feces, bird feces, the cat feces, even decaying leaves gives phosphorus. So that's all I want.
Well, thank you very much, and 30 seconds to spare, that's fantastic. And our lakes are very important, we appreciate that. Thank you. Would anybody else like to come forward and speak? Would anybody else like to come forward and speak? Just step up to the mic. And why don't you just introduce yourself and the organization that you're with and the community that you come from?
Okay. Can you hear me? Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Butler. I'm the Policy Director at the Ecology Action Center, and I'm here today with one of my colleagues, Megan McMorris, who works on climate change and energy. I'll keep my comments brief because I do intend to return on December 6th and make a formal presentation. I want to say thank you for your work, for Council's work, for municipalities' work on climate, on solar, on plastics. It was great to see the solar numbers and the increase. I also appreciate Councillor Zarowski's point that it's still, unfortunately, a drop in the bucket and we need to do a lot more. I specifically came here today for plastics. It's an issue that has galvanized our organization, both on land and at sea, but I think it's also galvanized the public. And there's some folks here today who are here specifically for that. Lil McPherson and her sister Caroline McPherson, and also Alan Collins. These are citizens who have been doing work on this issue and launched a petition. And Ecology Action Center also has a petition which is mentioned in this report. And we're at approximately 2,500 signatures. That petition is actually addressed to the province, so we won't be presenting it to you, but I'll tell you about it. Just quick comments. I see one of the suggestions is voluntary action. We don't support that. Our attitude would be if it's important enough. It needs, we don't have voluntary speed limits. We don't have a bunch of other voluntary things. So if this is important, let's not simply make it voluntary. We do support a ban. We'd rather see the province do it, and we agree with industry players that that would be better. It makes it easier for business. However, if the province is not going to move on that, then we would encourage municipal action. Glad to see there's a lot of discussion around extended producer responsibility. We support that wholeheartedly. It's along with reduction, it's part of the picture, and I'm glad to see the municipalities really pushing on that, and thank you for your efforts. And I'll see you on December 6th. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark, thank you very much for that. Would anybody else like to speak? Would anybody else like to speak? Please come forward. Welcome, and introduce yourself and the community you come from. Just make sure the mic is on, just push the button once, and you're good. Yeah. It's working? Yeah.
Okay. My name is Aaron Collins. I'm from Dartmouth, and I'm a member of the Ecology Action Centre, and also a member of the Canadian Association of Retired Persons Environmental Committee, based here in Halifax. And we do have a petition out at the moment on carp.org to ban single-use plastic bags in supermarkets in HRM completely. And we have quite a few signatures that's available. I'm going to speak on that more at the next meeting because it's been postponed. But I would like to ask a question about the climate action policy. I'm wondering if there's any plans to introduce electric buses to Halifax, because buses are actually a very big source of pollution. They emit a huge amount of carbon dioxide while they're standing idle, and they idle for quite long periods. In some cities in the United States, they have a lot of electric buses. Can you tell me if anything's being done here?
So, Collins, it's public participation is not a question and answer.
Okay.
But the fact that you posed your question, somebody may around the table may be able to speak to that. If they choose, I believe we have a couple of transportation committee members that may be able to answer that. So it's not usually a question and answer.
All right. I was just curious about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Thank you very much for coming and presenting. Anybody else who wishes to come forward and speak? Would anybody else like to come forward and speak? Not at all. Would anybody else like to come forward and speak? Thank you very much. Did anybody from transportation able to answer Mr. Collins' question? Richard, you know that question?
I'm just trying to scroll back a bit. There is a general request about new transportation methods, if I remember correctly. We did talk about looking at electric buses, electric ferries, and microtransit, alternate transit methods that would alleviate some of the problem. The difficulty is that the purchase of the diesel buses has been made and they stick around for a long time. So we need to look at precisely that. So the Transportation Committee has requested staff look at that.
Thank you, Councillor. So that brings us to the end of our meeting today. The next meeting, we discussed several times, is December 6th, 2018. We call for adjournment. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, and thank you for everybody for coming today. I appreciate it. Thank you all.